Well, I woke up on the lobby floor. Yeah, last night was some kind of war. I'm coming down like a waterfall. I check my phone, but you never call. Lost in the ceiling, caught up in the ceiling. I can't seem to let it go. Locked in this cage, I've been stuck here for days, and I can't seem to let you go. You pull me up and I put you down. You gave me love, then I stole your crown. You let me in, then I pushed you out. Come let me make up for all these pain. I've been a mess, tied by all these chains. Open my eyes, now I finally see. Shut the key, yeah. Can we be free? You pull me up, yeah. Can we be free? And I put you down. Woke up and saw everything but you next to me. I know that I've been the enemy, but I've had my moment of clarity. Lost in the ceiling, caught up in the ceiling. I can't seem to let it go. Locked in this cage, I've been stuck here for days, and I can't seem to let you go. You pull me up and I put you down. You gave me love, then I stole your crown. You let me in, then I pushed you out. Come let me make up for all these pain. I've been a mess, tied by all these chains. Open my eyes, now I finally see. Shut the key, yeah. Can we be free?
And we're live. Woo! Yay. Yeah. What's up, Mark? How are you?
What's up, Sean? Everything all right?
It's been a busy week, but it's been a good week. I don't know about you.
Everything's good, man. Everything's good. Just, glad it's going to be Friday already tomorrow and, the weekend.
It feels very much like this week dragged on for the first 2.5 days. And I chalk a lot of that. I chalk a lot of, I bet you can. I chalk a lot of that up to trade rumors, but also work. And then Wednesday happened. And of course, even then it dragged into like Wednesday evening before something finally took place. And I know you're excited, to say the least. But let's clue our listeners, our followers into what has taken place this week. And I'm going to let you talk a little bit here, Mark, and then I'll chime in as needed.
No, so, you speaking about the beginning of the week dragging a little bit, it's funny because, like, when it was breaking a little bit, when it was getting through the cracks that he was about to sign with us or get traded to us, and by he, I mean Darwin Quintero. It's funny, my Twitter just kept blowing up, and I couldn't really concentrate at work, so I just kind of parked to the side, and I just took like 30 minutes just to get, just to retweet and kind of check out to see what everybody's saying, the rumor block and what the Twitterverse is saying about the proposed trade for Quintero. And, there was a lot of things said and a lot of things going on, but like you said, I'm glad that it happened. I'm glad that, from all the information that we're getting, I'm glad that we got him, and I'm glad that we're getting him for the money that we're getting him for. Apparently, it's apparently a non-DP contract, which is great, because my only worry about acquiring him was his age. He's 32 years old. He still has gas in his tank, but still, once you start getting to that age, that's kind of when, the body starts going downhill a little bit, and the soccer players, man, they've been playing since their youth. So, it takes a toll on the body. So.
Yeah, it's, it's very rare to see players that play past, I would say even in this day and age, in MLS, it's rare to see a player play past roughly 30 to 32. We've been kind of graced with a couple of players in particular that have, actually 3 that I can think of in the last probably 3 or 4 seasons that have continued to play at a respectable level well into their 30s. One of them, Boniat Garcia, who's still with the team, and they're working on a contract for him to come back in 2020. And then we have DeMarcus Beasley, who just retired this year at the ripe old age of 36, 37. And then, the other one I'm thinking of is Vicente Sanchez, who spent a season with the Dynamo and then retired, but didn't even come to the team until he was 37 or 36/37. So and made an impact while he was here. It wasn't like he came here and then retired, or was kind of a non-factor. He was very much a factor, in his year that he was here. So yeah. Go ahead.
No, the thing about, when you get up to age, you got to be smart about the way you play. You can't run from one end of the field to the other end of the field. You got to be smart about how you play your position, and you got to be able to adapt. Because, like, for example, with Boniak, he was a 10 or a winger early in his career. Now he's settled into a defensive mid, or a center back, and that's going to prolong his career another year or two. And he seems willing to adapt, and the same thing with DeMarcus Beasley. He was a winger, attacking midfielder, and he ended up being our left back for the last couple seasons. So you just got to adapt, and just listen to your body. And I hope that, with the acquisition of Quintero, I hope that we still get a few more years of his attacking style and a lot more goals than what he did with Minnesota United. But yeah, Father time is undefeated.
Real quick, yes, I will acknowledge Sergio's comment that I was wrong. I will. I'm going to be very careful about what I say here. I will use the term judicious in my choice of words previously, and it was not. It was based on information I had at the time, which was accurate at the time. It was likely the Dynamo were not going to make any moves this particular window. It was only a 2.5, 3-day window, if you will, for trades within MLS. And while, yes, they did succeed in trading for Darwin Quintero, that was not a move that they anticipated having completed before the January transfer window opened. They expected to still have Marlon Hairston and still be without Darwin Quintero until closer to the draft. So I was asked, Generation Orange was asked via the Surge's supporters group Twitter account how we were feeling about things, and I replied that Sergio. I replied that, it was looking more and more likely the longer that it went that the Dynamo weren't going to make any moves this trade window, and that, I was feeling pretty certain at that point. And I still, to some extent, do feel pretty certain because they made one move. Now, granted, it was a very nice move. It wasn't a bad move by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, I also did include and say that Matt Jordan could surprise us, and sure enough, I feel like he surprised us. I think he kind of surprised himself by getting that deal over the line for the trade to be completed before the end of the season. Now, one of the things that I really want to focus on with this trade is the inclusion of the fact that Darwin Quintero, as part of coming here to the Dynamo, reworked his and renegotiated and was willing to renegotiate his contract and lower his salary so that it would not, so that he would not be a designated player for the Dynamo. Now, why that's important is because we found out through Twitter this week, through Jeff Reuter actually, that the 2020 DP threshold is going to be $1.5 million. Now, we had two DPs last year in Mauro Manotas and Kiki Struna. Both of them clocked in at $1.1 million for 2019, guaranteed salary. And so even with the kind of, the understanding of how veteran escalations kind of take place, I do not expect to see, if Mauro is still with the team, I don't expect him to see him making more than 1.5 million next season. I don't expect to see Kiki Struna making 1.5 million or more. So that leaves me looking at the roster going, there's not a single player making DP threshold money. And there's nobody on the roster with the exception of one player right now in Albert Elise who I think could command DP money. And that's interesting to me because all of the rumors surrounding Albert Elise and his likely exit from the team as he wants to go to Europe to play. Now, here's the thing. The Dynamo have created a situation where if Albert Elise does not go overseas to Europe to play and instead is open to continuing his time with the Dynamo for 2 or 3 more seasons, the Dynamo have the opportunity with the money available under the DP option to offer him a pretty substantial contract for the next 2 to 3 seasons. So let me ask you a question, Mark. If you could keep Albert Elise with the rest of the attack intact, which it looks like they could actually make that happen, is that something you would want to do?
I think you hacked into my note. Because, because I was thinking the same thing as well, because I was looking at the contract situations for our top players, right? And model with if he hits certain things, he would max out at 1.25 or something like that next season, but his base is 1.1. And it's crazy that you bring up Elise because it's something that we have to keep an eye on because obviously they're all on vacation right now, so Ramos hasn't had a chance to talk to the team and talk to each player personally, I'm sure and I would be interested to be a fly in that room to see what kind of conversation Ramos and Elise would have, because at least, obviously it's any young player's dream to go to Europe, and he's a young player. He's been playing with the national team for years now, so he has every right to want to go to Europe. And but I would like to see him do the Dynamo solid for giving him the opportunity that he's received to be scouted by teams from Europe. Maybe just sign an extension with the Dynamo with a release clause that for the Dynamo to get some money back for him, because unfortunately we're in this situation where he can leave for free. He plays the season, has a amazing season, and then he leaves for free and signs with whoever he wants to at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. But like we know in sports, not everything's given, not everything's guaranteed. So if Matt Jordan came to Albert Elise and his agent and told him, hey, you know what? We're going to give you a raise. We're going to give you a DP contract of $2 million a year for the next 3-4 years, just to have security and know that, hey, if European teams come asking for you and they give us something fair of value, then we'll go ahead and go and sell you and receive that money from the European team just for doing us that solid. Because let's be frank, he doesn't have to do anything. He just play the season out and he's gone, and we get nothing. And that would be sad. That would be the whole Arsenal and Aaron Ramsey episode for me again. And we don't want to go down that path. And the great thing about it is, that hopefully he does the same route like, Manotas did, and Manotas signed with us, re-signed with us, knowing that he had European interest from Portugal and from Russia and all these other countries. And he re-signed because, he I think 1-1, he likes the team. I honestly think he likes playing for the Dynamo and he likes the city. It's just that, again, he's another young player. His desire is to play in Europe and represent his national team, which obviously every player's goal is to do those things. And so he did the Dynamo solid by signing a 3-year extension with them, and allowing the Dynamo to gain some transfer fee money if they do sell him.
It's been brought up in chat. We've been talking about Albert Elise, but one of the big kind of question marks for this offseason is Christian Ramirez. Now, it's important to know that Christian Ramirez's contract has a team option for the 2020 season and into like the first half of 2021. That's the beer. I'm just throwing that out there. So the question being asked essentially is, are the Dynamo going to pick up Christian Ramirez's contract option this offseason? And I want to kind of put it this way. If I'm the Dynamo, if I'm Matt Jordan, I'm waiting until I know what our offseason transfers are going to be before I make the decision. Because technically Christian Ramirez is still under contract until the end of 2020, and really even through, I believe, a good portion of the 2021 January transfer window. So you have a few months. It's not like you need to make that decision today. And if you are able to acquire as a designated player another piece that is a perfect complement to what you're trying to build, that takes what Christian Ramirez can do and is, and maybe escalates that to an even bigger opportunity or even bigger, threshold of talent, then you don't turn that away. The reason I say that is because I believe the Dynamo are working, and I've said it before, they're working to sign one or two larger players, bigger players this year in the offseason, and they've made room for themselves to be able to do that. And if
well, I have a question for you.
Well, let me say this real quick, and then I'll let you ask that question. So here's kind of some of the thoughts that are running through my head. Okay, so if Albert Elise does end up going to Europe and they get $8.5 million or even $6.5 to $7 million for him in this offseason, maybe even $10 million, which is what they've kind of said is their desired number that they're going for. If they can get that much for him, that provides an ample amount of money for them to make some off-season transfers, which then makes the question of Christian Ramirez, being re-signed for another season a little bit easier for them to, a little more palatable, because they can keep Christian Ramirez and shuffle some other things. I think their desire is to keep Christian Ramirez under that DP threshold as well, so that they have that flexibility. And if you go and you sign him now, you're limiting a little bit of that, or picking up his team option for 2021. You're limiting yourself in terms of the salary budget that's available to you. Go ahead, Mark. Ask the question.
No, but before I go with the question, and let's not be naive either, and not think that Matt Jordan is talking to Ramirez and Christian Ramirez's representation. Letting them know like, hey, you made a positive effect when you arrived to the team. You had great chemistry with a lot of our players, and you made a great you made a great
contribution.
Contribution. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Contribution on the field, on and off, right? So obviously that right there is gonna I think they hold Christian Ramirez to a higher esteem or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think they have him in the loop. But my question that I was gonna propose to you the way you're saying things is that they're out there looking for DP forwards, center forwards, strikers, when in my opinion, I think they should be looking for DP 10s.
Well,
and mainly just focusing on DP 10. Well, and like I said, because I think we have above average MLS strikers, and obviously with Mato and Ramirez, but obviously we don't know what's going to happen with Mato, and Ramirez is that backup card, right? So if we get a DP10 to come in and distribute the ball, and who knows, maybe, I don't know, the way I saw an article on the Dynamo website that Ramos was kind of talking about Quintero possibly being that 10, being creative and headlining the attacking points for the team next season. So, in your opinion, I guess, do you think the Dynamo are looking for a DP center forward or a striker?
I think that they are a team, and Matt Jordan has historically been the type of general manager who sits back and looks at the options that are available. He's not one to specifically rule out one position or another just because they have a player there already. Perfect example is Adam Lundqvist coming in as left back when you still had DeMarcus Beasley and ended up having DeMarcus Beasley for another 3.5 seasons while you had Lundqvist on your roster. It's the organization is not opposed to having two quality players at the same position, depending on how things work out. So the reason I say they're kind of keeping options open and they're not really solid on what they're going to do with Ramirez, they have ideas. They have a lot of options right now because, okay, let's say Morrow goes overseas and Albert Lee stays. That changes what positions you need. Yes, you still need a DP number 10, But if you believe that Quintero can be that number 10 for at least the next 1.5 to 2 seasons, then you focus on the positions that you're losing, or at least on replicating what you had previously. So again, there's just so much movement to take place in an offseason, especially this offseason, where we have 2 players that viably could make their way to Europe for reasonable transfer sums, which opens up a little bit more opportunity and options for the team to be able to bring in some other players as well. So it's just still a lot of moving pieces at this point, and that's one of the reasons why I'm always very much kind of hesitant about trying to predict anything for next season until we kind of get through at least into the January transfer window and kind of know what we're working with in terms of player personnel, because undoubtedly the Dynamo would like to have as many players in place before the January transfer window, or at least at the very early onset of the transfer window, because they want to have time for those players to get here, visas to process, all that good stuff, so that those players can be there for the entire preseason. The season is scheduled to begin in sorry, phone call. The season is scheduled to begin for 2020 on February 26th or 24th. So there's still a long time to go of off-season and even preseason. And there's no guarantee that the Dynamo team roster is going to be 100% filled out before the preseason begins. There have been times where, because another club drags things a little bit on a transfer target that they have, or on a player that they would like to move out, begins on the 29th. Thank you, Sergio. Next year's a leap year? I guess it is. Good to know. But because other teams will sometimes drag things out, the Dynamo can't necessarily have those players in the fold immediately, and so they need to have plans around that. And it's easy for us, those of us that have played like FIFA on the computer or on consoles, to say, oh well, we can complete the move by deadline day, and that's that. But in reality, it's like there's no. FIFA is the most unrealistic simulation because there's no delay in visas, right? You have the player available to you the very next day. And, that makes sense when you're talking Europe, because they don't have to deal with a lot of the visas, but they still have to deal with the ITC, and the ITC still takes time. It's very rare for a player to get transferred, even in Europe, between countries, and not have at least a couple of days or a week or so before he's actually eligible to begin practicing for the other club. Because you do have to go through the visa process from country to country. So it's just... Go ahead.
So let me give you a scenario, and then, I'd like to see what your reply to this would be. Let's say both Mauro and Elise end up going to Europe, and you get around, let's say, 17 to 20 mil for both of them. What are you doing with that? What's the first position you're looking for?
If I'm getting 17 to 20 million for Albert Elise, I'm gonna go swimming in a damn bank, man.
No, for both.
No, I know combined. I'm no, even that combined. I mean, you're talking that's roughly 8.5 million per player, or up to 10 million per player, roughly. If I'm getting that combined between the two of them, like total, I'm happy. I'm content. Like that's bread, and I know, or money. I know that's what you were referring to, but if I have that amount of money to work with, so let's look at it from the MLS perspective first. MLS is going to take their chunk of change out of that, which is roughly 25% of that. So 25% of 20 million, that's 5 million.
13 to 15 mil.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that leaves you, let's say 13 million, but by the time you pay agent fees and everything else, 13 million. You got 13 million to work with. That's 6.5 million between two different DPs, except you have to remember that only 650,000, although that number may change a little bit, 650,000 of that can actually be used on player salaries. The remainder of that transfer fee has to go towards operations for the club. Now, that can be done in such a way that they spend a lot of money on the academy, and the money that they already had earmarked for the academy, they then turn around and use on designated players. Or otherwise, maybe they spend it on, maybe they've already planned and spent some of that on Tab Ramos to bring him in, because I guarantee you he wasn't a cheap coach to sign, even without his pedigree necessarily in terms of senior coaching experience. He still wasn't going to be a cheap coach to bring in. So they spent a little bit of money there. So let's say maybe they've earmarked a little bit of that money for there. They've earmarked some money for the MLS Academy, knowing that they've got homegrown players that are coming up very soon, that U17, U19 level that they've been talking about. Some of the kids that are over in Brazos Valley that have the opportunity to potentially get signed this offseason, moving into the beginning of next season to play under Tab for their first season. Maybe they spend a little bit more money in bringing in some higher profile players into RGV to get some more time with RGV and to improve the product over there. Maybe they bring in some more higher profile academy individuals in terms of coaching for the academy to work with Paul Holliker. Maybe they bring in some more higher profile front office people to help with marketing and advertising, which kudos to them. The marketing for Darwin Quintero for Tab Ramos has been off the charts level amazing compared to previous seasons. Like this, the advertising and marketing, the way that they've gone about it this offseason gives me a lot of hope for the Dynamo in 2020 from a marketing and advertising perspective and the perspective of acquiring new fans. They're going about it the right way, and that makes me happy. But so all of this into the ball of, okay, where does that money go? If I'm going to spend that money, if I'm Matt Jordan, I'm probably looking at probably two players from South America in general that can be attackers. Not necessarily pinpointing any particular position, though I would love to find a South American 10 that could fill in as a not take the place of of Darwin Quintero as number 10, but a player who can learn under a Darwin Quintero as number 10. I'm looking at Europe, maybe for a defender, a center back, maybe even Africa as well, potentially for one of those types of players. I believe that those are the places where you can find great value without overspending. And my biggest concern. Go ahead.
No, so you're going. So your route would be the conservative route. I mean, obviously, we know how the money has to be spent for the operation side, but as far as a player standpoint, with the money that you bring in, you don't think the head office and Brenner and all those guys over there and would want to bring in a big time player, because you're losing your two best players, and losing your two best players is never a good thing, and especially when you're not replacing them. I know you have Quintero and you have Ramirez, but you have two players there in their low 20s, and you're replacing them with a player there around their 30s.
Oh no, I was going to add, and thank you for reminding me. I was going to add that I would sign. So, like I said, two younger players from South America. I'm not expecting them to be that entire bill, nor am I expecting a center back from or even a defender from Africa or Europe to be a guy that's going to break my bank. The guy that's going to break my bank is going to be a center forward, a winger, number 10, even a deep lying center midfielder that can play a Cesc Fabregas type of role. I'm looking for a player like that that's not necessarily maybe 33, 34, but maybe a player that's between 27 and 30 that I can bring in.
I love that reference.
Huh?
I said I love that reference.
I'm sure you do. Look, I'm not a Chelsea fan, and I never will be, but I certainly have to. Well, but I still have to appreciate what Cesc Fabregas can do, and what he's.
Let me ask you one more thing. So let's say, just hypothetically speaking, obviously we lost our star center forward Mauro, right? Let's say, for whatever reason, a player like Cavani had interest in coming to the Dynamo. Would you approach that?
Say that again.
Let's say, hypothetically speaking, a player with name, like let's say Cavani, who's being linked to the Galaxy in Miami as of a couple of days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Was all of a sudden interested in playing for the Dynamo for whatever reason, because he's Uruguay, Tab Ramos is Uruguayan, there's that connection there, and maybe give him a call and he said, hey, why don't you come play for me? And one of the top paying MLS players in the league, which is about $67 million a year, which is what Zlatan was making. Do you entertain that possibility?
So here's my catch when it comes to older players, especially coming from.
32. I
know, I'm aware. Coming from Europe. I say older players. I'm still referring to basically above 30. Older players coming from Europe. And here's my thing. It's a lot easier for a player coming to LA or coming to New York, or even Miami's a little bit different of a situation because they are very humid throughout the summer, etc. But the Dynamo especially, man, when we hit those summer months, there's not a 30-year-old that plays in Europe right now. There's not, that would be able to sustain even 75 to 80 minutes consistently in that heat. And we've seen, for whatever reason, the scheduling sets up in such a way that during certain months of the season, we end up with games where we are playing, no joke, 5 matches in 2.5 to 3 weeks. And sure, you could say, well, we'll rest that player. But you've just spent all this money for that player to be your key star, and now you're going to rest him for 2 matches because he can't take it? If I'm as a fan, that would piss me off.
Well, here's my counter to that argument. He's the center forward, so I mean he's not really running that much. He's gonna mainly be in the box. I mean, you know, if he loses the ball around, yeah, he'll. That's not gonna.
I think I've had a bit of an internet connection issue. Actually, maybe it's Mark. Maybe it's not me. I don't know. We'll see. Mark, you still there? He's not, so I guess it's a one-man show for the next little bit. Hey, Mark, whenever you do hop, are you back, Mark? I can't hear you, bro. Try disconnecting from voice chat and reconnecting instead of just muting and unmuting. Usually works better. Yeah, so, you know, going back to the older player in the Heat, I know what Mark is trying to get at by saying, you know, you've got to have one of those players that, you know, could
Hello?
take a. Hey, there you are. Go for it, Mark.
Oh, sorry about that, man. Can you tell me where I left off?
Just start from the beginning of the Cavani. You had just started and you disconnected within like the first 5 seconds. So.
Okay, so basically what I was saying, you know, to counter what your argument that you were saying is that, you know, Cavani's a center forward. So, I mean, he's not going to run that much. He's going to be inside the box. And the only running he'll probably do is if he loses the ball, he'll chase after a defender here and there. But I would understand that argument if you're bringing in a attacking 10 like a Cam, like maybe like a David Silva who's going to Miami. But for a center forward, I don't think you have to worry too much about the heat, you know, being an issue. And I think, to be honest, that's why the Dynamo have had so many home matches in the beginning ladder of the season, because they're trying to get those matches in before it gets scorching hot down here. And I don't know. Everybody's professionals, man. You just got to go out there and play.
No, I don't disagree with that, and I don't want to confuse what I'm pointing at with what you're saying, which is that, you know, if it is a center forward like Cavani in particular, he's not going to do a whole lot of excess running. He's going to be intelligent about how he uses his energy, and that's all good and well. But, you know, even Morrow towards the end of matches, man, the guy is tired. And look, he's a young kid, and he's been in this heat for years now. So it just shows you that it's hard on the body. It's very tough on the body. And no matter the age, but especially when you get to be older, it starts to be even tougher on the body. And, you know, we've seen it in players. Even Zlatan, man, he wilts when he comes here. You know, Steven Gerrard, when he was here, you know, he wilted, but he wasn't a center forward. But all the same, you know, Wayne Rooney, same type of thing. It's just, I think it's important to note that when those star players come to Houston, sure, they may have a match here and there where they do really well, but more often than not, we're bottling those best players up, and it has nothing to do with our approach and everything to do with the humidity and the heat and just that factor. And, you know, MLS has tried to help with that a little bit by, you know, by having water breaks and having those, you know, later start times. We'll push it back if we need to, if it's still too hot to play. And that's great. But my problem is it still does not address the real issue, which is that, and one of the reasons I feel like the Dynamo have to take the approach of mostly going with younger players is because older players' bodies just don't hold up over the duration of a season. And look, we've seen it with younger players, how many of our players get injured consistently and are out for good periods of time, and then when they come back, they are re-injured within a month, dealing with some small knock, some small injury that's tied to the previous one. Hamstring cramps and things like that, they happen all the time when players are playing either against the Dynamo or for the Dynamo here in Houston. And that type of thing cannot be overlooked. And I hope, with all that said, I hope one of the things the Dynamo do this offseason is they address the concern that I have, which is tied to the fitness and training program that we have. It's clear that was not up to par last season. The fact that we had no player that could seemingly could physically not go a full 90 without just completely wilting, even away from home, tells me there's a fitness issue there. And look, Tab Ramos, he's going to run the players, man. He knows how to get the fitness back up. But, I just look at it and I believe that there's something to be said, that there is something to the idea that we need better training and things like that. But like I said, hey, if the Dynamo get an opportunity to bring in Cavani, if they can make it happen, or a player like Cavani as a forward, a center forward up top, then yeah, I think they make the move. You got two things that go into play there too. It's not just being able to land Cavani; it's the fact that he has to want to come here and play. And if I'm a player, here's the thing though. If I'm a player, if I'm a Cavani, and I know going to MLS, I can pretty much choose any destination that I want to go to, and pretty much make whatever I want to make because MLS is going to be willing to foot some of that bill for my team, then at the end of the day, I'm probably not going to choose Houston as my premier destination club. And that's always been an issue for Houston across every major sport. We don't land the big-name players, Houston Astros notwithstanding the last 3 seasons, but we typically don't land those big-name players because they don't want to come and play here. They just don't. And even during the Dominic Kinnear years, we weren't landing big-name players. We were developing players or had players developed through the system that came up and played well enough to become starters long-term. So
no, and I totally agree with you on that aspect. It's a hypothetical. Like I said, it's just one of those things where, when you have a coach like Tab Ramos, and this is why I stress so much about during the head coaching process and who you're going to hire, that I wanted a coach with some pedigree and who's been around, because, I know there's factors when it comes to, signing marquee players to come play for the Dynamo. I know there's issues, there's obstacles, and yeah, everybody wants to go play in LA and New York, blah, 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 blah. But like I said, there's players out there who can be had, you see Seattle. Seattle is cold and rainy and dreary. You see places like Portland. The same thing goes with Portland. You see these clubs who I think we should be on par with. Obviously, as far as a marketing and national standpoint, obviously LA and New York are always going to be ahead of the herd or whatever. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be on the same level as far as player abilities to get players as a Seattle, or as a Portland, or even as an Atlanta United. Even though I know Atlanta United is a different situation because Arthur Blank, who's their owner, is willing to go spend big and go get the players needed to create a championship caliber team year in and year out. So, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be on par with Portland or Seattle or even Sporting KC.
Well, so I'm going to throw it back at you. I would say that this season, KC is probably not your best example. They didn't do a whole lot, and what they brought in wasn't very helpful. With that being said, you point out a Portland and a Seattle. So what enables a Portland and a Seattle to bring in players, what enables Portland and Seattle to become those teams that can afford to spend more money, is they have a system where they are developing players consistently that are making it from their academy all the way up. They are finding the Christian Roldans. They are finding the Jordan Morrises. Two of their bigger name starters right now, Christian Roldan and Jordan Morris, came through their own system. You also have Nuhu, one of their starting outside backs, came through their system. So they can afford to sit there and not spend a lot of money on the depth players because they are bringing those players up through their system. So they now have a bigger surplus available to spend to, basically as kind of bonus money to say to a player, hey, look, we'll give you this little bit of extra money that, we've saved. We'll give it to you if you go ahead and agree to come to Seattle, or you agree to come to Portland. It's the same type of thing.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, and this is just going back to what I said, I think a couple of shows ago. Obviously the foundation of a team is built through youth academy, and that's why I'm excited about the acquisition of Tab Ramos, because I think he'll I guess accelerate the youth academy and bringing up players, hopefully, because like I said, I mean, it's an area that the Dynamo for the last decade have fallen way behind, and while our neighbors up north and the FC Dallas have done an amazing job. New York Red Bulls have done an amazing job. Seattle Sounders and Portland Timbers, just like you said, have done an amazing job. That's why they're able to have this extra money to go get the top level. Well, not top level. I mean, like quality players who are worth that DP money to take them over the top, to take that foundation of players over the top and make them champion.
Yeah, I mean, in that regards, I obviously we're in agreement, and but again, I think that's one of those things that a lot of fans miss when they're like, well, spend more money. These other teams are spending more money. No, they're not really spending more money. They're spending differently. And there's a very important definition to have there, distinction to make between the two. Is it's not that they're spending more money. Now, they are spending more money, but they're spending it on two players in particular per team. And to be fair, this season we did come up tremendously in the amount of money that we spent year over year. Over the last 5 seasons, we've spent way more money this year than we have. And not just like MLS level inflation. We're talking above and beyond MLS level inflation. If I remember correctly, Callow said we're spending like 30% year over year, which is more than just about every other club except for like the top 2 in spending combined. Or spending, just the top 2 clubs in spending. So that's substantial. Yeah. And it shows that the Dynamo are willing to spend money, but they're also trying to do it intelligently. They're trying to do it in a way that they don't blow their entire bank on a single player, and then are stuck with a situation like a Cubo Torres, where the player may have moments where he's special, but when he's off, he is not anywhere close to special. When Kubo is Kubo, he's amazing. When he's Mr. Torres, he's a completely different animal that's not even worth having on the pitch. And so I think that they're hoping to find ways to kind of counter that, so that they're not putting all that money into a single player only to have them be a player that doesn't end up showing up and doesn't end up, reaping the benefits of the rewards. I'm not saying they shouldn't spend additional money on a DP this offseason. I think that's their intention. It's just they want to find the right guy to fit both their system and to fit what they're trying to do, and a guy that Tab Ramos feels that he can work with. I am excited.
They want to make sure they get somebody that delivers.
Well, and that as well. And I'm excited to see Quintero under Tab Ramos, because I think Tab Ramos can even unlock Quintero a little bit more than he's ever been unlocked, just in terms of his play. And that is exciting and special in and of itself, to be able to say about a 32-year-old striker, or a 10, if you will, to have a coach that feasibly could pull something additional out of that player simply by having time to work with them.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons that I'm happy that this acquisition happened the time it did, because it gives them enough time to get acclimated with the situation, gives them enough time to come talk to the head coach and kind of see what their game plan is and thinking, because it's one of those things, like the more time you spend with the player, the better they get acclimated to your system. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to deal with, as far as if we do make a huge acquisition in January or even beyond January, because I think the transfer window for MLS ends in March, I believe. I know it starts in January, like all the European teams, but I think ours ends in March, something else, somewhere around there. But I mean, obviously the earlier you get the player in, the better it is for the team, for him to get acclimated and know the system and know how to play the system, play a few games, in preseason to try to get some chemistry going and to get a groove. So I guess we'll see. I mean, I'm interested to see what kind of players they're targeting.
For sure. I'm definitely with you. I I continue to believe, and I've said it, and I'll continue to say it, that I believe this team is focusing on trying to find specific individuals that they believe will help the team overall. I don't believe Quintero is the last kind of quote unquote big move for the offseason. I think he's probably one of maybe 2 or 3 at most. I think we're probably going to look at a fairly quiet holiday season, though. I don't expect a lot of movement. We might see, a little bit of movement around maybe the waiver draft, in the kind of trade window when it opens right ahead of the draft, super draft. We may see a little bit of movement there. Yeah, I don't think we see anything major. I don't think we see kind of an AJ De La Garza trade happen. I don't think we see anything like that this season, off season, but I do think we start to see the team take shape when we hit around that kind of middle of January mark, right as we start to look at preseason starting, which I think they intend preseason to begin early February, maybe even like kind of tail end of January.
So what happens with that Kyoto chip that we have in our back pocket? What do you think happens?
I've been back and forth on this. I know I've gone on record to say I think he's probably gone this offseason. I'm rescinding that remark. I am going to put this out there. I think Kyoto stays. And I actually thought that before his Instagram post from today. I thought that earlier when Matt Jordan said some of the things that Matt Jordan said when he was asked about the Kyoto situation previously, I started to kind of think that they were actually looking to keep him around. I mentioned this on the Dynamo Discord at one point earlier this week. I wonder to some extent if Matt Jordan didn't realize how frustrated players were getting with I have a suspicion Matt Jordan was starting to realize just how frustrated players were getting with Wilmer Cabrera. And so, because if Matt Jordan didn't realize that, then of course he would have just sent Kyoto off, no questions asked. He could have used it as a trade asset or, get a little bit of money back for him and call it a day and be good with it. But I think once he started hearing some of the player stories about the frustrations they were having with Wilmer and his coaching style and his management style and his approach to controlling players and managing players, I think he began to think through, I think he's got an impression that Kyoto's not as, while Kyoto has his kind of prima donna mentality, I think he knows that Jordan knows that on the pitch, Kyoto's a lot better than he showed under Wilmer in that kind of little bit that he played, not just this season, but I think last season as well. And I think he knows that Tab Ramos is the type of coach that can help Kyoto get through some of that mental struggle, the off-field struggles, the learning to be a professional struggles, and help him find his way and do it in a way where he can tap into some of that emotion and some of that rage and anger and frustration on the pitch, but do so in a disciplined way. Not in a way where he's not in a way where he's going to get up and push a guy and get a red card in like the 5th minute of a match on the road. I don't foresee that happening under Tab. I think Tab's a different kind of coach, and he's going to set that expectation early on for Kyoto. And I think Kyoto understands that if he wants to continue his professional career, he's got to do it with the Dynamo because they own the chip right now. Like you kind of said, it's a chip we own. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm agreeing with you. I think I'm leaning more 55-45 that Kyoto returns to the team, and it's a shame that it's gone this route. Obviously we all know about Kyoto's personal endeavors and his nonsense off the field, and and all that stuff. But it's gonna be quite a job for the PR department and for the Dynamo to make this work if Kyoto doesn't come back to the team, because you see all the negativity on Twitter about how people want Kyoto to leave. And I think we ran a poll on Generation Orange Radio on our Twitter asking, what do you want happening in this transfer window? And the majority of the people wanted to get rid of Kyoto. And a lot of people thought that he was going to be part of that Quintero trade instead of Marlon Harrison.
A whole lot of people thought that.
Yeah, so I thought it was going to be one of those 2-for-1 type of deals that we were going to get, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But I think, like I said, Kyoto has talent, like I said previously in past shows, and he has a lot of talent. And I think it's one of those things where Matt Jordan and I think Tab Ramos knows, like, if Elise does go, Kyoto is that player that can help ease that departure of Elise. And the thing is that if he does stay with the team, the PR department, the marketing department, whoever, all hands on deck with Kyoto to get his image back to at least, respectable with the fans, because like I said, there's been a lot of negative response on Twitter for Kyoto to be out. I'm saying that he's gonna be out. He's gonna have to be out there, community events, just to try to build his image back up. You know, charitable events, all that other stuff. The whole shebang. But yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I'm leaning more towards Kyoto staying. I mean, obviously, it depends on what happens during the transfer window, and it depends on how desperate some MLS franchises are as well. Because I mean, like I said, when the whole rumor of Columbus Crew coming in with that $2 million bid for Kyoto, I mean, obviously there's teams out there that acknowledge the fact that this player is talented, and he's a player who has played in MLS already for 3 seasons. So there's no acclimation that he needs to do aside from acclimating with his new teammates. Then he doesn't have to worry about getting accustomed to MLS play because he's already been in MLS play. And like I said, he's a national team player as well. So, he has a lot of value as far as a soccer player goes on the field, but off the field is where you have the situation where, it might hit him a little hard. And I think he got hit in the face with the reality check that, hey, you can either turn this around, do a whole complete 360, or hey, you can go back to playing in the domestic league in Honduras and make 20 cents to the dollar than what you're making here.
I think one of the things that Quintero can bring as well, and this is going to sound funny coming based on Quintero as a player or as a person, but I think no, Quintero. I think Quintero brings a bit of understanding how to be a professional. Now, yes, he's had his off-field moments. He's had his on-field moments. He's very much an older version of Kyoto. But I think the thing is that Quintero has learned at least how to mitigate those things. And if Quintero can take the opportunity to kind of talk to and work with Kyoto, I think what Kyoto needs to kind of do right now is it needs to be a kind of a gut check. There we go, gut check. Kyoto needs to take this opportunity to realize, like you said, his options are you play for the Dynamo for this season, and maybe if you do well enough, maybe they'll send you where you want to go. Or if you don't play well enough, they'll send you back to Honduras, and you'll be playing in Honduras, and you'll be making no money whatsoever. And it's very likely that, the frustrations you've had with the Honduran media is only going to escalate if you have to go back to Honduras because you couldn't even perform, couldn't even make it in MLS. So I just think there's an opportunity there for Quintero to become a bit of a
mentor.
A mentor to Kyoto in a way. I don't want him to be the sole mentor of Kyoto because that would not be what you want. But I think that's kind of the start of where how you get through to Kyoto. You use a player that's been there, done that, and has a bit of a similar kind of trajectory going on. And you just help Kyoto and I think Tab Ramos is one of those coaches again that can help Kyoto figure it out as well. But again, that falls on Kyoto to accept and be willing to accept that to be willing to accept that level of interaction, that level of leadership, that level of mentor, if you will.
I totally agree with you, but we'll see. I mean, like I said, it's one of those things where he has to personally want to change. I understand the life of a soccer player. You want to be out there, have a good time with all the other stuff, with all the responsibilities that you have. But if you're going to be out there doing stupid stuff, you got to understand that stupid stuff is what they're going to want to put in the media first before any of the good stuff that you do.
Absolutely, especially in Honduras. They're known for picking apart a player when they show this kind of attitude or whatever. So, guys, hey, you guys have been pretty interactive, but not a lot of questions thrown our way. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to toss them in there. I agree with Mark. I'm curious what you guys think about Kyoto. Do you think he's staying or going? Sergio says He leans on the trade side still. There's interest from other teams. Take the money. I kind of can understand where he's coming from on that, though. I mean, and you pointed it out. Columbus, rumored Columbus threw, $2 million at the Dynamo and said, "Hey, we'll take him off your hands for $2 million. Don't talk to anybody else." And in thinking about it, if I'm the Dynamo, if I'm Matt Jordan, I'm probably taking that $2 million. However, on the flip side, do I think Kyoto might be worth more than $2 million if he could actually come and turn it around this season? Oh yeah, I do. I think Kyoto can be a $3 to $5 million transfer player.
You think about it. Let's say he goes to Columbus Crew, right? And he just kills it over because Caleb Porter's a good coach. They have good set of players out there in Columbus Crew and all that stuff. And let's say he does 10 goals, 10 assists, and he's just balling. He's just dominating. Maybe one of the best left wingers in the league or whatever. He can easily be transferred to a Mexican team for $3 to $5 million, and then you're looking like, damn,
Well, and that's just it, right? So let's say Columbus pays us $2 million to get him off our hands. We take the $2 million from them in allocation money. The next step is now you have to spend that $2 million on a player, and you have to spend it on it's allocation, so you have to spend it this year. The thing with allocation, and I want to point this out because coming from the perspective of hearing a lot of people talk about, oh, well, you have all this money to spend it. The problem is, yes, you spend it this 1 year, but once this year is over, then what? Then you're on the hook for that full salary that you have told the player you're going to, guaranteed the player you're going to pay him. It's important to remember when allocation is traded like we did to get Quintero, that's $300 this year and $300 next year. But after 2021, if Minnesota signs another player after 2021, they're going to have to find other allocation money to pay them if they're paying them through allocation money to begin with or buying their salary down via allocation money. So it's just important to remember allocation money when it's traded, it's for the year that it's traded unless otherwise specified, but rarely is, especially when you have those large amounts of allocation, rarely is that allocation more, if it's anywhere near $1 million, rarely is it more than a year or two at most. And so even if you bring a player in, you're still on the hook 2 years from now.
Yep. Agreed. And I think that's why Minnesota took the allocation money the way they did, because they get $300K this year, and then they get $300K next year. So whoever they decide to bring in, they can use that money to evenly distribute between 2020 and 2021.
Exactly. Callis says I would trade Kyoto for a dirty jockstrap. The new Dynamo says I would trade him for a bag of empty peanut shells. Here's the thing, though, right? So
that's what I'm talking about, though. That's the negative implications of the fact of Kyoto's behavior on the field and off the field. It's and it's just it's not just them two, because I see them too on Twitter talk about they want to get rid of Kyoto and obviously here on Discord, but it's a lot of fans out there, man, that are very unhappy with the way things ended with Kyoto.
I want to point out something because I always find this funny. I would love, if Kyoto does stay here, I would love to come back to this topic at the end of this coming season, and I would love to ask these two specific people. If Kyoto has a fantastic season, he goes out there, he proves that he's past all that, he's matured, he ends up linking up with Quintero to the point that Quintero becomes the best number 10 in the league, Kyoto becomes the best left winger in the league, Elise ends up staying, and they have the best attack in the league. If that all happens, I guarantee you these guys in chat that are saying I would trade him right now for nothing, they would be apoplectic. They will be, you know what I'm saying? It's one of those things where it's easy to kind of bash a guy right now, but if the guy comes out and he turns into a winner after having a few bad seasons, guess what? He's a winner again. We turn, and I'm guilty of it as a fan too, right? We'll turn on a player, and then if they go and have a good season after I turn on them, I am willing to forgive everything. Hey,
who?
Go ahead.
Do you know who's a great example of this? Mario Balotelli. When he was winning and whatever team he was on, everybody loved him. But when he started losing, he was losing control on the pitch and he wasn't making a difference. Everybody hates him. You know, it's just the nature of the game. You know, they love you when you're winning, but they hate you when you're losing. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's true. And we see it across the board in other countries as well. So we've reached the 1 hour mark. This is really actually all we had on topics for today. So I don't know, man. Are we making it two? I don't know.
I don't know, man. I mean, there's a lot of things we can talk about. I mean, as far as who we think the Dynamo's a target, or what players out there they can you know check out. I know a lot of people would want to bring a second Quintero here, which I'm talking about the guy from River Plate Juan. But I mean, it's just up to the guys. I mean, what's going on? What's this court saying? I mean, y'all want to make it two, or what y'all want to continue talking about? You have any questions about anything for today?
I mean, I'm down for throwing it to next week at this point. Like they have not posed any questions whatsoever this week, and I'm like, all right, cool. That means they're good. That means that means they're still figuring out and absorbing the Quintero trade, and they don't really have any
So,
questions they want to ask.
so I guess before we go, let me just ask you this: if everybody stays, how do you see Tab playing
4-3-3,
the
4-3-3. He's already said it, man. 4-3-3. That's what he's playing. He's made it very clear.
but
That's his
so
intent.
so you have so it would you have Quintero as a 10? Would you have him left wing?
Okay, so Quintero is my 10. Tomas is probably my backup 10 if Tomas even sticks around. Uh, my
I
left
think
uh,
Tomas is.
my left winger is Kyoto, followed by Memo, and I think the two of them compete in preseason to see who wins it. My forwards,
Okay.
obviously, if Maro's sticking around, he's my forward. But if Christian sticks around, then I let the two of them cycle in and out, and depending on the team I'm playing, maybe I go to a 4-4-2 and play them together, just like we did this, at the tail end of last year. My right winger, if Elise is still here, there's no doubt Elise is my right winger. And I'm, swapping Kyoto and Elise every so often and letting them play on either side because that worked every once in a while. And I think that attack right there, just as is, if left intact, look, it was a great attack last year. There's no
It
denying it was
was.
a great attack last year. And that was even with the injuries that took place. That was with the red cards that happened. That was with Wilmer coaching half the season, followed by Davy Arnaud, who I thought did an admirable job considering what he had to work with. And like I said previously, he inherited a team that was broken mentally. I just think that there's a lot of quality in our attack already that makes it one of the premier attacks in MLS, even if we don't have the names attached to it that other teams maybe do. And then you throw Quintero into that mix, and suddenly you have an elite level MLS attack without having the big names. And to some extent, people will say, well, that's detrimental to the team to not have a big name. But I turn that around and I say that's a chip on their shoulder going into next season. And if there's any coach who knows how to take a chip on a shoulder and turn it into a positive and help guys find that determination, that drive to be even better and to one up the superstars in the league, it's going to be Tab Ramos. So
But it's
if
also
go ahead.
no, but it's also one of those things where let's say the four stay intact, right? It's Quintero, Kyoto, Mauro, and Elise, right? And then let's say the Dynamo go get off to a blazing start like they did last season, and let's say they don't have the dip that they had after the Gold Cup. It gives the Dynamo as a team in the front office an opportunity to do something that they haven't really been in position to do before, because the last two seasons the teams have taken such a drastic dip in the second half of the season. When that summer transfer window opens up, you have the opportunity to add a player of quality that can take your team to that next level. And it's not just talking about the team having a chip on their shoulder. It's about talking about that now you have a team working in all cylinders that you know can make the playoffs. But now because, like I told you in my last show, my consideration for success this upcoming season is playoffs. Now, if that's the seventh seed or if that's the top seed, it doesn't matter. I just want them to make the playoffs. But like I said, in this scenario, if they're running on all cylinders and the team that they have is just, they're in there and they're a player of quality away from being an MLS Cup challenger, then, now you have a whole different scenario to think about. Because, I mean, like I said, there's a lot riding on this offseason, but we're thinking of this offseason as far as players that we're going to bring in. But what about if we don't lose anybody? That we still have players. Then if we don't lose Mauro, Mauro's a top 5 goal scorer. He can be. He has that potential to be a top 5 goal scorer in the league. At least he's the 10 to 15 assist guy a year. And arguably when he's on, the best right winger in the league. So I mean, it's, how do you say it? Addition by subtraction, or subtraction by or however that saying goes.
No, you had it right the first time. It's neither of those, because you're not adding by subtracting.
Yeah, you're not losing, but you're adding.
Exactly. Your quality is coming from the fact that these are young players that could get another season together. Again, I mean, we want to sit here and talk about the Dynamo don't spend a lot of money, blah, 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 whatever. That's fine. Great. I'm glad you feel that way. But if the team came out with the exact same lineup next season with a few minor tweaks to the back end and adding Quintero, if that team comes out and then the first 10 matches they go 8-1-1, guess what? Fans are going to be all about the Dynamo again. Fans are going to shut up about needing to spend money again. But here's the thing. They started well last season too. The proof of the team quality is going to happen in the summer months, when the team traditionally slows down year over year. We've seen it every year. When they hit the summer months and they hit that latter part of that summer, they are struggling. And again, that comes from fitness, that comes from conditioning, that comes from a much more loaded schedule. However, on the flip side, the Dynamo have an advantage this season they didn't have last season. There's no CCL that they have to play in this year. That's one less competition to worry about this season. Players are going to get a little more rest. The flip side of that, though, is you have players like Kyoto, like Elise, that very well could end up back on their national teams again this year. And that's, again, absences that could be prolonged absences. Are we in a position to be able to fill those?
But this is what I'm saying. Like, if our off-season moves are minor acquisitions to where we just strengthen our depth, and we keep, let's say at least signs an extension with us, right? Just to do us a solid, and he stays with us. And obviously we already have Model. If they just go out, obviously Model's backup would be Ramirez, right? Let's say, they pick up somebody of quality to where, when Elise leaves for national team duty, the fall off isn't so drastic to where, you're leaning on Tommy McNamara or whoever you can find in the streets to, play right wing. And obviously Memo can handle left when Kyoto leaves or whatever. But if you have quality depth and this team is running on all cylinders, then I'm not too worried about making the big acquisition and stuff like that. I would be more concerned about it, if we were maybe making a push to MLS Cup now in the middle of the season, where we can acquire a player of talent, to get us over the hump. Because obviously you see what a player of quality can do to a team, even if they're brought in middle of the season. You're going to give them their week or 2 or 3 weeks to get acclimated to the team and get used to the system, because that player realistically is brought in to give it that bit of a oomph once you get to the playoffs. Because obviously with now how the playoffs have changed in the format, where it's a knockout round each and every round, it's not a home at home again anymore. You're going to need that extra oomph, So I don't know. It might be something to think about as fans, don't get me wrong. I would not be opposed to a big DP signing in January. But if it doesn't happen, but we keep Mauro and we keep Elise, I'm saying I'm not too frustrated about it.
I'm in the same boat. I think the acquisition of Quintero sets up the possibility to hold off a little bit. I still think that the Dynamo have intention to sign somebody in this offseason. But even if they don't, if the team can come out and play as well as they did and then maintain that momentum moving forward beyond the first couple of months of the season, then I'm perfectly okay with the team that we have. And I've been perfectly okay with the team that we've had. It's not that the team isn't quality or doesn't have quality. It's that mentally they broke. And once they broke, you just saw it was a cascade. Nobody on that team could figure out how to get over that hump. And, I feel like next season is a totally different ballgame. And we have to be willing to accept it as fans that maybe the Dynamo are in a position where they just keep everybody, like you said, and especially the two key players, Morrow and Elise. If they could keep that attack intact, that's a seriously deadly attack against most MLS defenses.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about maybe 25 to 30 goals between those two guys.
Oh yeah,
And then like a lot of the fans, a lot of the people here on Discord talking about what about the road wars, and it's true. I mean, we as a team, if we're going to be challenging for playoffs and for the MLS Cup eventually, the road thing has to be a thing of the past, man. We have to start winning on the road. We have to start gaining points on the road. This thing of just winning 2 games on the road every year out, year in, year out, is just not going to work. No matter how incredible you are at home, no matter how much of a home advantage you have to win on the road. And I hope Tab brings that mentality to the guys that, what, it's 11 against everybody once you go to the road. It's us against them. Let's go out there and just, attack and attack. You have nothing to lose. This my mentality when you're on the road. For me personally, if I was coaching, we have nothing to lose. Let's go out there and let's just ball. We're either gonna win 4-2 or we're gonna lose 3-0. So.
Sorry, I'm muted. I agree with you.
No.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
This is one of those moments where clearly it would be better if we were in person together.
Yeah.
I agree with you. However, with that being said, I think Kenny made a very good point just a few minutes ago that it's not necessarily that you have to win matches on the road. What we need to do is we need to grind out results on the road. And we need to stop giving up goals in the final minutes of matches at home. There were plenty of matches last year that we would lose by a single goal, going up to the death. And, a draw here and there makes a big difference in the season. There were matches where we were up and then we would end up with a draw, or worse yet, a loss, giving up 2 goals in the final 10 minutes of the match. If you can right those things, if you can fix those things without having to pay a lot of money to a player or whatever, then you're doing it. That's all you need to do. It's again, I come back to this. It's not that this team doesn't have quality. It's not that this team doesn't have talent. It's not that this team's not competitive against even the best teams in the league. It's that the team mentally just didn't have it last year. And again, I attribute that to a lack of coaching and a lack of management from a coaching perspective. The coach was crap, and it showed on the pitch. It showed throughout the entire season. And certainly you would think that maybe Davy Arnaud coming in could help that. But I think at that point, most of the players were already too far gone. They needed an offseason. They needed a break to disconnect and get their heads sorted. So, before we linger on that point, Sergio asked, will Tomas Martinez be here next season?
Honestly, for me, Tomas, I think he should be here next year. And that would be one of those things where if Tomas is on the bench as your backup 10, I think that's great quality and depth. Imagine having Tomas come in the last 20 minutes, fresh leg, ready to run. And the thing about Tomas runs. That's one of the things that we know because that's what Wilmer asked him to do every game, run. But he runs. He has, prowess, and he knows how to attack. So imagine it'd be a lot easier for him to attack defensive once those defenses have played 75, 80 minutes, and to be able to create in those last 15, 20 minutes of the game.
I mean, I look at the, and Kenny brings up a stat, and he says it's a terrible stat, but I think it points to the struggle the Dynamo had last season. It's the whole, except for Chicago, the entire rest of the league scored twice as many road points as the Dynamo did last year. And so here's the thing, though, right? If you start picking up points on the road, you start picking up results on the road. If you turn that around, if that's the only thing you did different next season compared to this past season, and everything else stays the same, you're in the playoffs.
You're a playoff team.
You're a playoff team. So again, it's not that we're far away. It's not that this team needs to be rebuilt, burn it all down, and start from scratch. It's that it's that they need to figure some of these things out. Oh, sorry, Kenny, I didn't mean to put words in your mouth. And it is true. I mean, yeah, he says I meant terrible from a morale standpoint. And I think that's fair. I look at it as a terrible stat in the standpoint of that the Dynamo couldn't figure out how to get more road points than they did. And look, sure, we had a couple of road wins on the season, but other than those road wins, I couldn't think of a time when this team went out and played the same way on the road that they did at home. And
I can say one, but that disappointed me drastically, honestly. The game against New York FC, and I think that's where they kind of figured that they were going to get rid of Wilmer, because they were winning that game. That game was so amazing back and forth, and then for them to lose the game like they did the last minute, it was off a set piece with a header.
Yeah,
it was just it basically just epitomized our whole season in one play.
It breaks you down as a player mentally, and people say, oh well, you're a professional, you bounce back from that, you move on, but no, it sticks with you. It especially when that wasn't the only match that ended that way. That wasn't the only match that they gave up the goal late. And look, I've talked to players. I've had other people who have talked to players and asked them about that. And a lot of them will say and have said that last year there was this kind of situation where it felt like, when somebody had a mistake, it was a snowball effect. It started to become an infectious thing among the team. One player would have a mistake and they would get burned on a play, and sure, maybe the center back would cover for him and cover that mistake. But then the next time that that opportunity arises, maybe the outside back plays well, but the center back is now the one that's struggling, and we started to see it. It was like mentally they just weren't tough enough to get through the kind of the rut that inevitably every team goes through during a match. When you get to those later stages in the later minutes of a match and your body's just exhausted and worn out, our players just didn't know how to push through to get those final few minutes of energy out of their body and push their body, just that much more to try to push for a win. And especially on the road, we would, oh man, I don't want to talk about road matches because it hurts me. But, again, if you fix that, and again, don't have to win them, just find results on the road that you weren't finding before. You win 2 or 3 matches on the road and you draw 4 or 5 on the road. Guess what? You're definitely a playoff team.
So moving on from that, let me ask you a question. Maybe I don't think anybody's really, I think I saw it on here earlier. What do you think they do, the Dynamo, as far, since we're talking about defenses, what do you think they do about the goalkeeper?
I don't know.
Because honestly,
Go ahead.
Because honestly, Joe Willis, I think I'm out on him already. Even though he's done good, here and there, but he's just I don't know. Tyler Derrick, I think if I had to choose between the two, if I'm going to keep one, I would keep him. But obviously, Tyler Derrick, he's had some rebuilding to do from off-field situations, and injury situations as well. As I think he had a concussion that kept him out for like a majority of the season last year. But
no, the concussion was just the last maybe like month and a half to 2 months of the season.
Yeah. So what do you think? Because goalkeeping, obviously, it can look good when the back four are playing great and the goalkeeper doesn't have to do anything. But when the back four break down and you need that last person to make the save, that's when goalkeeping does become an issue. And I don't know. I think we've been like middle of the pack when it comes to goalkeeping for like the last couple of years, if not below average on goal.
I take a different approach when it comes to goalkeeping. I think the stats around goalkeeping can be very misleading because the majority of those chances that our goalkeepers gave up were within the 6-yard box or at least within their own penalty area. And you're reliant as a goalkeeper on the front, the 4 in front of you or the 5 or 6 in front of you if you include the defensive midfielders. I don't chalk a lot of the frustrations last season up to Tyler Derrick. I don't really put them necessarily on Joe Willis. With that being said, if I have to pick a starting goalkeeper to go into the season, I'm probably picking Tyler Derrick because I think from an athleticism standpoint, from a big key save standpoint, Tyler Derrick is the better keeper. From a consistency standpoint, you're going to get more consistency out of Joe Willis. But consistency also means you're not going to end up with those big saves. You're not going to end up with those big moments. You're going to end up with a lot of, okay, he really should have saved that, and then, okay, he saves when he shouldn't have saved. That kind of thing.
Do we see Michael Nelson next year?
I think we see Michael Nelson in Open Cup. I don't think we see Michael Nelson, see regular minutes on the pitch. I think he's good enough. I really do. I liked what I've seen out of him for RGV and otherwise. I think he's a talented enough and a good enough goalkeeper to be a starter in MLS, and I think he could push Joe Willis out. I don't think there's much of a chance that the Dynamo look to get rid of Tyler Derrick because he's still considered, if I'm not mistaken, still considered a homegrown player. And so that's hard to get rid of a homegrown player that's come through your system, not because of the attachment, but because of the money, the salary save, and also they're automatically protected, during an expansion draft. And you have another one of those coming up. We don't have to deal with that this year, but we will have to deal with that next year.
No, and I agree with you. I think that's where it's going to be interesting to see because I think that Michael Nelson should. I mean, I think you took that kid in the first round last year or second round, if I'm not mistaken, or a year or two ago. And and when you take a player like that in those first two rounds, even though I know we haven't had the best history in these super drafts as of late, I mean, you got to give him an opportunity, and I think for him to be our backup goalkeeper should be his goal this year, and him playing in those Open Cup competitions, his should be his goal for this year, no pun intended, for him to, be on that Dynamo squad for this year and push kind of make it easy for the front office to say, Joe Willis, thank you for your service. We're moving on. If I could choose between the two, I would choose Derek over Willis, and then I would have Michael Nelson as my backup.
I will say this. I think Tab Ramos is coming into the Dynamo without any preconceived notions about his starters. I really don't think he knows who he wants to be his starters. I think he's going to let preseason and practice determine that. He's going to let the players prove that they deserve it, and he's going to allow RGV players the same opportunity. And so Nelson's going to get a shot to prove that he deserves an opportunity, and I don't think that there's much of a possibility that Michael Nelson is going to come up short in that. I think Nelson's ready, and look, if we go into preseason and Nelson's competing, and we come out of preseason and Tab says, look, I've been impressed by Michael Nelson, I'm going to put him on the senior roster. I have no problems with that.
No, I don't either, and I think what Michael Nelson has to as a manager is obviously the youth and more athleticism, obviously because he's younger. But and it's something where, like, obviously this is where Tab Ramos's influence comes in, because he knows how to develop these players from attacking players to defensive players to goalkeeping. This is what he does. So if he can take Michael Nelson and help him up his level this season to, like I said, where he's the backup keeper for the season and he's playing in the Open Cup competition, then I think that's a win for the Dynamo, and I think that's a win for him personally as well, because Tyler Derrick is 30, 31 now. Pretty soon, Michael Nelson is going to have to take over the realms of being the goalkeeper for the Houston Dynamo, if that's the way they're choosing to go. Obviously they can always go look for a younger goalkeeper somewhere else, or for an established goalkeeper somewhere else. But I think with the goalkeeping situation, I think they like to have the option of growing from within. I think they take a lot of pride in being able to develop a lot of goalkeepers. So we'll see.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I like I said, we'll see, and I think that's kind of maybe if there's a theme for this offseason, it's kind of we'll see. There's a lot of things that can happen between now and preseason in January, and there's a lot that can happen even between now and the Super Draft in January. So all I would say, I think, if I'm going to kind of round it all off into a nice kind of bow, is just stay tuned. We're going to be talking player acquisitions. I guarantee it. There's going to be at least another trade or two, because the Dynamo, they're just going to find a way to trade players. There's going to be Various things that happen throughout this offseason. There's options to come where the Dynamo determine who they're picking up options on and who they're not. I think that one may be delayed because of Christian Ramirez specifically, and because they're still trying to find out what they're going to do with Elise and Elise. Elise and Morrow. Elise and Elise. But all of that to say, just stay tuned. I mean, there's still, like I said, there's still a long way to go this offseason, and we've already started the offseason on a pretty good note. And here's to hoping that this trend continues and the team continues to find, and front office continue to find ways to improve the team without having to necessarily break the bank. I think that's admirable that they're doing it, at least so far. They're doing it without having to have, a major impact player come in. Like you said, though, I'm okay with them not doing it if they do it, mid-season, because we're pushing for an MLS Cup spot. We're pushing for first or second in the West at the mid-season mark, and they're going, okay, yeah, we could bring in one more player, and that puts us over the top. I hope that that's where we're at looking at halfway through the season.
Do you think Quintero makes an appearance this Saturday since Club America's in this Saturday?
Hell to the nah. I don't. I say that, but no, I don't think he does. I think he has some off-field issues that he needs to deal with and address right now, and I think he realizes that unless the Dynamo specifically ask him to be in the stadium, he's probably better off staying away for right now.
I agree. But who knows?
Oh, absolutely. Well, guys, with that being said, it's kind of tapered off a little bit in chat, so I think I'm going to call it just about here. Mark, any kind of final closing thoughts from you?
Just like just recapping, hopefully we can keep the ball rolling. Dynamo have gone off to a good start with the head coaching hiring and, with the acquisition of Quintero. And like I said, we're just in that wait and see mode. We have a lot of different things coming up with that re-entry draft and all the super draft and all that other stuff coming up. And who knows, maybe the Dynamo might be a little active in those mechanisms, and we can pick up a quality player or two or something like that, or pick up some Gam and Tam to use for the January transfer window.
Sure. Or, hey, maybe we pick up that Tam and Gam and use it in the summer window. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So, guys, with that being said, if this is your first time tuning in and watching, even if you're watching after the fact, do us a favor, like the video, like the stream, share the video, share the stream, and subscribe to the channel. As a reminder, guys, subscribing to the channel gets us closer and closer to our goal of 100 subscribers. At 100 subscribers, we get our own custom YouTube URL for the channel, which means that we will have something to the effect of youtube.com/GenOrange or Generation Orange or Gen Orange Radio, something like that, to make it even easier to find our streams and our videos. Guys, you've been great tonight. I appreciate you guys, everybody that's kind of chimed in. It's been a good show. I've really enjoyed it, and Mark, as always, it's been a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a good night, and we'll talk to you again maybe next week if something happens. If not, maybe not for another couple weeks. We'll see. We'll find out.
See y'all later, guys.